So
Did you hear about the guy who sold a fucking airport that didn't exist?
Really?
Remember that one? A Nigerian dude sold a fucking airport
We're
that
winning.
wasn't a real airport.
Yeah.
It's bonkers.
Yeah.
Like they spent a fuckload of money.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They got to make a movie about that.
Probably.
This is the guy Joe is talking about.
242 million. Fuck off. Sold a fake airport for 242 million.
The one who scammed a bank of $242 million. And in the process, committed history's third largest bank fraud, wrecked a multinational bank, and placed Nigeria firmly on top of the scam food chain. But how does one even have the connection, skill, and guts to pull off such a scam? Well, here is the movie Isola Adesanya asked for.
You know what, Toby? When the son of the deposed king of Nigeria emails you directly asking for help, you help. His father ran the freaking country, okay?
Nigeria is known for many great things, having the best jollof rice, the first African Nobel laureate, the second largest movie industry, the home of Afrobeat, and so much more. But there is one thing that the giant of Africa is famous, or should I say infamous for, and that is scamming. Nigeria is so famous for scamming that one of the worst things you can be as a Nigerian is to be a prince or to be named prince. But how did this history of scamming begin? The Nigerian prince scam, also known as the advance fee scam, is popularly called 419 in Nigeria. The scam is called 419 after section 419 of the Nigerian Criminal Code, which focuses on obtaining property by false pretenses. The general concept of this scam goes back to the early 1900s, with a variation called the Spanish prisoner swindle. In this scam, letters would be sent describing a wealthy prisoner in Spain who supposedly had hidden riches but needed help to get them out. The scammer would then request money upfront to cover fees or bribes, promising a share of the fortune later. And fast forward to the rise of the internet in the 20th century, and Nigeria became a hub for online fraud. Spam emails offering vast sums of money from allegedly distressed Nigerian princes started circulating widely. But the question is, why Nigeria? Well, 5 main factors makes Nigeria the perfect breeding ground for scams like this. Number 1, there was widespread internet access in Nigeria compared to other African countries at the time. Number 2, limited cybersecurity at the time. Number 3, the perception of Nigeria being a very wealthy country due to its oil wells makes those stories somewhat believable. And number 4, general ignorance about Africa, to be honest. And finally, an explosion in the number of unemployed and underemployed Nigerian youths. But while Nigerian youths were carrying small-scale scams, a former employee of a major bank in Nigeria was thinking of something way, way bigger. The context of the scam began in the late 80s when Nigeria considered moving its capital away from Lagos to Abuja. By then, it was clear that the city could no longer be the seat of Nigerian power. The crazy traffic, congestion, chronic housing shortages, overstretched infrastructure, and severe environmental sanitation problems were some of the reasons behind this trying to move its capital. However, the final straw came in 1990 when a failed coup saw Babangida move the capital away from Lagos to Abuja. Among the various reasons for choosing Abuja were that it was a new city that nobody could claim ownership of, and it was strategically placed in the middle of Nigeria. The only issue with creating a new national capital in the middle of nowhere is that you have to build new infrastructure. Things like an airport, and that is where our story actually begins. Our scam begins on a fateful day in 1995 when Nelson Sakaguchi, a director at Brazil's Banco Noroeste located in Sao Paulo, received a fax. The message came from the Nigeria's Ministry of Aviation, asking Banco Noroeste to invest in Nigeria's upcoming airport, which would yield massive returns. Sakaguchi or the bank had never had any previous dealings with Nigeria or Africa, or even any interest in African investment. So Mr. Sakaguchi set up a meeting in London to meet these government officials. Before I continue, if you're thinking that Sakaguchi doesn't sound like a Portuguese name, then you're right. Mr. Sakaguchi's parents, along with around 5% of Japan, had emigrated to Brazil after World War I. So that clears the confusion with this story because a lot of people assume a Japanese bank was scammed. That is wrong. Anyway, Sakaguchi was not a novice in banking. He had had 20 years of prior experience, and by 1995 he was the head of Banco Noroeste's international banking and the head of the Cayman Islands. Now, of all of Banco Noroeste's 100 branches, the Cayman Island branch was really unique. The bank chose the Cayman Island as its overseas branch because Cayman Island was a tax haven. And like most banks that really had branches in the Cayman Island, they never really had a branch there. It was mostly virtual, run electronically from Brazil but governed by the laws of the Cayman Islands. Interestingly, Sakaguchi was one of the 3 staff members of the branch, and as the head, he had total control over the branch activities. Even more interestingly, records of the bank's activities was only visible to a handful of international department employees and auditors, and this structure was implemented to comply with the Cayman Islands banking secrecy laws, which would somewhat come back to bite them. Once the agreed date for the meeting came, Sakaguchi was greeted in a London restaurant by 3 people: the CBN governor, Paul Ogwuma, the Nigerian aviation minister who had sent the initial fax, and his wife. While Sakaguchi didn't know much about the aviation minister or his wife, he was enamored by Ogwuma, who had an international reputation in the banking industry. Before long, they had sold Sakaguchi on the investment opportunity, and a deal was struck. All Mr. Nelson had to do was make an initial deposit of $35 million. And Banco Noroeste was set to receive 100% of its investment in 2 years when the airport was fully built. What Sakaguchi didn't realize was that none of the people were who they claimed to be. Sakaguchi had just met with Emmanuel Nwude and 2 of his accomplices, Christian Ikechukwu Anajemba and his wife, Amaka Anajemba. Mr. Emmanuel was poisoned as the CBN governor, while Christian and his wife were posing as the aviation minister and his wife. Now, it is unclear if all African looked the same or if the convincing portfolio they presented to Sakaguchi made him think they were legit. He literally didn't double check, and the agreement was signed. From July 9th, 1995, the money started rolling in. And at that time, since the maximum he could send was $6 million, they went in so many installments to several of Mr. Nwude's shell companies. By December 1997, Sakaguchi had sent a mind-boggling $190,294,401.11 to 21 different private and corporate accounts. Now remember that the initial agreement was for him to invest just $35 million. However, as the years rolled by, Mr. Nwude convinced Sakaguchi to invest more. And since he was already knee-deep, Sakaguchi didn't want to stop. And 2 years after the deal was struck, Sakaguchi got the news he had been waiting for. The airport was finally finished. But there was one little hurdle left to clear. He had to pay fluctuation fees of about $6.7 million to speed up the disbursement of his earnings. However, Sakaguchi wasn't willing to pay that much. He insisted on paying $4.2 million, to which the scammers insisted that they wouldn't take anything less than $5 million. And at that point, it seemed like a veil had suddenly fallen off his eye. It was also around this time that the confirmation fax came from a CBN governor claiming they had paid $250 million to a certain Bank of Noroeste as his earning from his investments. But just like the airport, there was no Bank of Noroeste anywhere in the world, and it was clear that Sakaguchi had been played. And as if the universe was working against Sakaguchi at this point, something should happen that totally exposed Sakaguchi and his dealing. In August of 1997, the Simonsen and Cochin families, the owners of the Banco Noroeste, wanted to sell their bank to Banco Santander, a Spanish bank. This meant that auditors had to look into the bank's books, including the hitherto secret records of the Cayman Islands branch. And after a joint board meeting in December 1997, a Santander official asked the heads of the Banco Noroeste the reason for the massive gaping hole in the Cayman Islands account. A fraud investigation was quickly launched, and since there weren't many employees in the Cayman Island branch, it didn't take long to pinpoint Sakaguchi as the main culprit. Sakaguchi tried to flee to the United States and was soon arrested by Interpol at the JFK airport and sent to Switzerland. Criminal investigations soon revealed that Sakaguchi had taken $530 million from the Banco Noroeste account. That massive sum was 2/5 Noroeste's total values and half of its entire capital. However, the owners decided to take a loss and push with the sale. But only 3 years after, Banco Noroeste folded out. Now, in case you're wondering, there seems to be a $51 million difference between what Sakaguchi sent to the scammers and what was eventually discovered by the auditors. Upon further investigation, it was found out that 2 of Sakaguchi's colleagues had discovered the scam, and they both received $20 million of hush money. Sakaguchi himself has sent tens of millions of dollars of Noroeste's money to his wife in the United States to buy several properties. Ultimately, all of those properties were confiscated and Sakaguchi and his accomplices were imprisoned for 2 years for fraud. However, finding the person on the other end of the scam took several years. Nwude and his accomplices enjoyed their loot for several years. But in 2003, a trail created by reading fine print from the Cayman Island accounts landed in Lagos, Nigeria. And the legal proceeding that took 3 years was the most fascinating in Nigeria's legal history. From bribes, to bomb scares, to kidnaps, to releases and arrests, this legal proceeding had it all. Nwude was picked up in June 2003 at his residence in Lagos, Nigeria, and 7 of his exotic cars were seized. And in 2004, the newly formed Economics and Financial Crimes Commission charged them to court. Amaka Anajemba Nwude, Emmanuel Nwude, Nzeribe Okoli, and Obum Osakwe with Ikechukwu Anajemba were all charged in the Federal High Court, Abuja, with 86 counts of fraudulently seeking advance fees and 15 counts of bribery related to the case. They all pleaded not guilty. And as amazing as it sounds, the presiding judge Paul Ogwuma claimed that the crime was not committed in Abuja, and as such, he lacked the jurisdiction to hear the case. He struck out the case and recommended the Lagos High Court as the most appropriate place to hear the case. So they were all released. Only for a few minutes though. They were immediately arrested just outside the court in Abuja and taken to Lagos to continue the case. And by the next year, with the trial nearing its definitive conclusion, underhand tactics begin to play. $75,000 in cash was offered to EFCC's head honcho Ribado. And not only that, a prosecution witness was almost kidnapped on his way to the courthouse. All of these antics prompted the jury to add extra counts to Nwude's case. Again, in 2005, a bomb scare caused the courthouse to be evacuated and the case to be adjourned. Resolution finally came when Amaka Anajemba admitted to helping her husband. She was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and instructed to pay back $25.5 million. Weeks later, Sakaguchi, the object of Mr. Nwude's fraud, gave a testimony live in the Lagos High Court. With no more room to maneuver, Nwude and Okoli pleaded guilty to the crime. They had considered with hopes of getting a lenient sentence. However, that did not matter much as Nwude was sentenced to 25 years and Okoli to 12 years. And the next week, Ribado, the EFCC head, made a refund of $17 million to Vivian Richie. Nwude's assets were confiscated and was charged with paying $10 million to the national government. For most who followed the trial on the pages of newspaper on television screen, this victory was, however, short-lived, as Nwude was released in 2006. In the months after, he instituted many fundamental rights cases against the Nigerian government, claiming most of his seized properties he had gotten before the fraud. And as funny as it sounds, as when this video is made, Emmanuel Nwude is allegedly in court facing a 15-count charge for forgery. Would this be the last we would hear of this amazing scammer? Who knows? But in researching this story, it is one of the most bizarre occurrences of fraud I've ever seen. How can one person be so trusting? Was there some sort of African magic or juju in play? How can you invest almost $200 million and you couldn't take a simple flight or send someone to go review your investment once? There are so many unanswered questions in this case, and I would like to hear what you all think. Drop a word in the comment section. And if you've watched this far, please hit the like and subscribe button. We cannot wait to hit 10,000 subscribers.